And our job is going to be to see if we can recreate all of these lines and shapes exactly as we see them here down on our own paper. In order to do that, we have to do the things we've been talking about in class. We have to be thinking about the sizes of things in comparison to one another. We have to be thinking about how things line up with each other and so on. You have a copy here that you can be looking at while we're drawing here also, and I will try to point things out on this copy on the screen whenever possible. First thing we should do before we even start doing any drawing is just to kind of familiarize ourselves with what it is we have to be working with here. We've got some oval kinds of shapes here, a lot of just ovals and parts of oval shapes, and they're all special sizes in comparison to each other. I think when I start this drawing, I'm going to start out with this oval shape right here. Seems that a lot of other things attach to that. So I need to understand how high this shape is compared to how wide it is. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure that, and I find out that it's about 1.5 times as wide as it is high. This is how high it is right here. And so if I take that across, I need about half that amount of space again. So when I start drawing, that's the size I'm going to need to make this thing. Notice this. Now I'm just kind of looking around for some things here. This distance right here is the same as what? It's the same as this distance. So if I get my oval drawn properly, I'm just going to take this amount and mark it up here for the top of the head. The head right here is a little bit narrower than the oval shape, so I have to make sure I do that, and it kind of tapers in at the side. Notice how the top of the eyes, how far up do they go in this space? About halfway up here, okay? I need to kind of center those eyes. First of all, this little space between the eyes is centered right here. And then if I go from each eye about halfway over, actually a little bit more than halfway over, that's how wide those eyes are from the center over toward the side of the head. The mouth is about 1/3 of the way up through this space right here. Okay. The bottom of the nostrils look to be about 1/3 of the way down or so. All of these little lines right here line up with certain things across from here. As I get some of the ears and things drawn, these little lines will be, and points will be easier to find. The pupils, center there and the center right there, and this line is kind of parallel with that. The eyebrows right over the middle there, and right across from the top there, and right across from this point, and so on. I think this thing is going to be fairly easy to do. Let's see if we can get started with it here a little bit. Now, you have to understand I'm drawing on video here trying to make this tape, so I have to push a little bit harder here. But yesterday we talked about how important it is for you to grip that pencil up away from the edge and lighten up a little bit. When you finish this drawing, when you finish getting all these marks down on paper and all the lines down, it should be very, very light before you make any changes you have to make, and then you will go and make things darker. But I have to draw a little darker here so you can see it on tape, so you stay light, all right? Okay, we measured this, and it's 1.5 times as wide as it is high. So I'm going to mark off where this little oval shape is going to be on my paper here, and I'm going to make it that high. And notice I've allowed room here for the head. I need this amount of space again for the head, and I need a small amount of this space for the neck down here. So I'm going to be okay on this paper. Everything's going to fit on here all right. Make sure that you allow for that also. Now I need to decide, my pencil is trying to escape there, but I got it. I need to decide where I want the side of this to be, and then I need to take this amount of space right here and mark it across, and then I need to take half that amount again and add it on over here, because this oval shape is 1.5 times as wide as it is high. And it's extremely important that I get this correct, because everything else in this drawing is going to attach to this. So I need to make sure that these marks are such that I have 1.5 times, okay, this distance is 1.5 times this distance right here. I don't care what it is, but if this was 2 inches, this would have to be 3 inches. If this was 2 miles, this would have to be 3 miles right here. Okay, it has to be 1.5 times as wide as it is high. And now I think I'm going to go ahead and draw that shape in. If I look at it, it's just a nice continuously curved oval shape, And so I'm going to kind of take a little practice swing over this area a little bit, a couple times, and then go back and lay it down here in place. And back this way again. And just kind of see if I can balance off this oval shape right here. This is the basis now for all the other things that I do in this drawing. Everything is, all the sizes of everything else is determined by this. Where other things are placed in the drawing is determined by this. So I need to be extremely careful with this first shape. As you draw that little oval there, make sure you don't have any dents in it or bumps in it. There's no straight lines in there. It's a continuously curving line. So be real fussy with yourself as to how you set that up. Something we'll talk about later on when we get into drawing things in more detail is simply this. You start out on a piece of sketch paper like this and you do your drawing and you make all of your mistakes on here and you do all of your erasing and so on. When you get everything exactly the way you want it, then you trace your own work onto a good piece of paper and you have everything neatly and cleanly done. So if you have to make some adjustments on here, don't worry about it too much. We'd like you to keep your erasing to a minimum, but if you have to, go ahead and do it. All right. Now, we have the oval in place. Now I'm going to work on the next large shape here, which is this head shape in this character. Distance from the top of the oval to the top of the head is the same as the distance from here to here. And I can tell that by looking at it, and if I'm not sure, I'm just going to measure that. Measure it here, compare it up to there, they're the same. So if they're the same over here, they have to be the same on my paper. So whatever this distance is, I need to take that, slide it up to the top up here, and mark that down. That's where the top of this head is going to be. That's where I have to put it. How it compares in size. All right. Notice the sides of this head are slightly narrower than this oval shape. If the oval is this wide, the head up here in this area has to be slightly narrower than that. Okay, that's just the way it is. So if I come straight up from here and move in just a little bit and put a mark there, and if I come straight up from here and move in just a little bit and put a mark there, I should be in pretty good shape. Just slightly narrower than the oval shape. And now, these little points right here should be pretty easy to find also. Notice how the head kind of keeps tapering in here slightly as it comes down. It keeps getting narrower as it comes down. So if I'm this wide right here, I need to move in a little bit, just a little bit, and go straight down, and that's where that will join onto there. And I need to move from here in just a little tiny bit and straight down, and that's where it will join in on this side. Now I have the beginning and the end and a couple of points along the way as to where this head shape needs to be. And again now, this is just a kind of a soft little curve here. I'm going to do a little practice swinging over the top of that. Don't ever overlook the importance of taking that practice swing before you actually put that line in place. It just helps you get the feel of that line much better. And we just kind of keep moving along here and just kind of carve that into place. Keep yours very, very light. Don't worry about making it dark at all right now. It just should be just dark enough that you can see it. And now we have the two largest shapes in here taken care of, and that's what we want to do. We want to start with large shapes if at all possible. And these need to be correct. They need to be just as exact as we can get them, because everything else now is based upon where these are. And so if these are not correct, if I have this stretched too much, too tall or too wide, everything else is going to get stretched out, because we're using these shapes to help us get the smaller shapes in place. All right, Let's go take a look at the eyes right here. When we were just kind of looking things over to begin with, the eyes, we said the tops are about halfway between here to the top of the head. And so if that's halfway on my model that I'm working from, it has to be halfway here. So I'm just going to put a little mark about halfway up where I think about the top of those eyes are going to be. And now let's take a look at the sides of the eyes. I need this little split right here between the eyes. It's very, very small, and it's right in the center across the top of this oval from one side of the head to the other. And so find the center right there, and then just move a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left, and make a good decision as to how big to make that little split between the eyes. All right? Now, from that point right here, going across to the side of the head, if I go halfway, I'm almost there. I need to go just a little bit more than halfway, just a tiny little bit more than halfway from here to the side of the head to find that point. So here we go, halfway, and just a tiny little bit more right there. And the same thing happens over here. Come across here, halfway, just a tiny little bit more. And so halfway, just a tiny little bit more. Now I have everything marked here pretty well for these eyes. I should be able to set those eyes in place here pretty well. Notice how they're not exactly straight up and down. They kind of look like they tilt outward just a little bit. So I'll do that as I set them in here. Kind of angle them toward the outside just a tiny little bit as we put this together. And again over here on this side, we'll practice swing over the top, taking part of it at a time. Remember, when we have these curved shapes, we don't necessarily want to draw them all at once. We take a little part at a time. Keep yours light. Okay. Now is a good time again to just kind of do some checking and see if there's anything that you need to, how they compare to each other. See if there's anything you need to change at all. We need to have you paying attention now to the procedure that we're doing here. How are we figuring this out? How are we lining things up with each other? Nothing in this drawing is going to get guessed at all. Everything is we're going to tell ourselves exactly where we want things to go. I'm going to trim this off here just a little bit. If I wouldn't have to be drawing on a video, I wouldn't have to erase this either. It would be light enough I could just leave it there, but I have to get that out of there. Well, some people might choose to do maybe the mouth next, or the ears next, or the pupils and the eyes next. I guess it really doesn't matter what we do next right here. Let's just mark some other things down here that are just going to be really easy to do. If there's something that's easy to do, get it on your paper, because the more you have on your drawing, the easier it is to find other things and describe other things. Let's go with the pupils right here. Middle there, and the middle there, and the middle there, and the middle there. Those should be some very easy points to find. So let's get them marked down. Center there, and the center there, the center here, and the center right there. And now these are just gradually curved lines. They're not quite parallel with the ones on the outside here, but they're close to that. And if I draw them that way, I'm going to be just fine right here. Just kind of swing over the top of that, get a nice gentle curve there on both sides. And we have those little pupils in place really pretty easily. Some things fall in very easily, some things take a little bit more describing, a little bit more figuring out. Let's take a look at the ears right here. Let's take a look at this ear first of all. Now I want you to be thinking about, where is that point right there? And where is this point right here? How are you going to describe that? You should be able to describe that pretty well. Look at this one. If I go straight across here, I'm just a tiny little bit above the top of the eye. It's almost straight across from the top of the eye. That's where it is over here. That's where mine has to be. No matter how big I'm making it over here, that's where it has to be, across from that eye. Where's this point right here? Right in the center, on the side of this oval that we did here. Okay, there's the oval, there's the center on the side. Mark that down right there. Now, how wide is this ear right here? Well, I know that it sticks out past the oval shape. It comes out past here somewhere. But there's something right there that will help me determine how wide it is. Look at this space right here. This space and this space are very much the same. If they're the same here, they need to be the same over here. Excuse me. So, however much space I have here, I need to mark off that same amount of space right here. And now I have beginning and the end and a midpoint for that line for the ear. I could kind of do a little trace right here almost to kind of get the feel of that curve. And now I come over here and take a little practice swing. Maybe just draw this top part to begin with. Very lightly, and then swing it down here and carve this bottom part of that ear into place. Alright? That wasn't too bad. Let's go over on the other side. I bet the other one's going to check out pretty much the same. Just about even with the top of the eye. Just about even with the middle of this thing. Straight across from the other one here. And these widths right here are the same again. So let's do that. Cross from the top of the eye, mark it. Cross from the center of the oval shape, mark it down. This space and this space are the same. Mark them off the same. Alright? And now again, practice swing over here, nice curve, keep it light, and right back down over to here. Okay, get a lot of these major shapes in here pretty well. Anybody need to, how are you doing with being caught up here? Pretty well? Alright, good. Okay, let's just take a quick check on mine here. I'm going to, before I go on, and take a quick check on yours, and is there anything at all that seems to be out of place? If so, fix it up. If not, we're ready to move along here. Okay, let's go inside the oval and take a look at some of this stuff in here. It's really about all we have left. We got a few other little things, but not much. Let's go right here. Okay, across this, from top to bottom on this oval shape, how far up is this bottom of this mouth is what we need to know. How far up through this space? Well, I think we mentioned that when we were first looking things over. It looks like it's 1/3 of the way up. If I took this amount and that amount again and that amount again, it'd be 3 times across there. So if I come up 1/3 of that distance, it's going to be right about here. I'm going to mark off bottom of that mouth. I need to find these little points on the corner. Okay? So I need to line them up. I need to line them up with other things. Well, look at here. I'm about across from the bottom of the ear, and if I go straight up, I'm right under there, the middle of that space. Okay? I need to find out what's above or below, and what's across from whatever it is I'm trying to find. So in this case, across from the bottom of the ear, and below the middle of that. So here's the middle of that. I'm going to just keep coming down till I'm right across from the bottom of that ear. Put a mark there. Okay, let's go over on the other corner of the mouth. I'll bet we're going to find about the same thing. Straight up there, I'm under the middle of that space, and across here, I'm about even with the bottom of the ear. Well, it would be crazy to put it anywhere else. I'm not going to put it over here somewhere. I have to go right underneath the middle of that, and right across from the bottom of that ear. Right there. Okay? Now I have the beginning and the end of the mouth, and a center mark, and it's just a nice sweeping curve right there, no dents in it or anything. A couple little practice swings over that. Gradually lower that pencil. Carve that thing in place. Alright. Let's take a look at those little nostrils right there. Just some little circles. Circles are very easy shapes to recognize, and they're nice shapes to draw because they're the same dimension across. The diameter of a circle, a line through the center of the circle touching the edges, is the same no matter where we draw the thing. So if I can figure out how wide this is and about where it's placed here, it's going to be very easy to set this thing in here. Let's look first of all at where the bottoms of these nostrils are. Well, how about if I come from the top of the oval down to the mouth, halfway, I'm going to be just a little bit past those. Alright? So if I come over here halfway down and then go up just a little bit, that's where the bottom of these things need to be. Okay, they're just slightly less than halfway down to the mouth. So I'm going to just mark that down. Okay, let's mark the sides of this thing. Look at here. This side about even with the edge of the eye. This side about even with the edge of the eye. That should be pretty easy to do. It's actually a little bit narrower than the eye. Just a tiny little bit narrower than that pupil in the eye right there. So let's do that. Mark it off a little bit narrower. Now I have the width of that circle taken care of. So I can draw the circle now because it's the same all the way around. I know the bottom of it goes here. It's going to be that wide. I can just carve that little bugger in right there. The one across from it is the same size. So all I need to do is find the sides of that. This one is right even with the edge of the eye, this white part of the eye here. Right even with the edge of that. So we'll mark that down. And the other side is just a little bit narrow. It's just a little bit narrower than this white part. Of course it is. It's the same size as this other one. They need to be the same. Now I have those placed right where they belong, and they're the right size in comparison to everything else. Seem to be falling in there pretty well. The way I see it, I have 6 lines left to draw here. Doesn't matter which ones I do next. Let's do the smile lines right here on the corners of the mouth. I need to find this point and this point. Let's find this one first of all in the corner right here. Straight across in the corner of the mouth, almost right underneath this corner of the head. Okay? Straight across in the corner of the mouth, underneath the corner of the head. Right there. This one, straight across the bottom of the nostrils, right underneath, just a little bit inside this edge of the eye right here. Inside edge of the eye, down a little bit, across from the bottom of the nostrils, right there. Now I have just a little curve that goes right through the corner of that mouth. That one's set into place. Absolutely nothing has been guessed at here yet in this drawing, and we're not going to guess at anything ever. Everything gets lined up and marked before we draw it. Going over to the other side of the little smile lines right here. Okay, straight underneath the edge of the eye and right across from the bottom of the nostril. Bottom of the nostril under the edge of the eye has to be right there. Okay. This point, well, it's across from the bottom of the ear. It's a little bit lower, tiny little bit lower than the bottom of the ear. And look at, if I go straight up here, I'm going to be right there, just to the left of the side of the head. Left to the side of the head, right there, straight down to just a little bit lower than the corner of the ear, right there. There's my 2 marks. Nice soft little curve. Set that in place. Alright? A big grin on that character there. Notice in the eyes right here, these little reflections that are up here at the top. Doesn't take much description right there. They're just right up in the very corner. They're just a small, tiny little curved shape up there. We can set those in place pretty easy. The real tiny things are really quite easy to do, especially if we have everything else in place. Let's do the eyebrows. This one is right over the center of the eye, and it's if I come across from, I'm a little bit higher than the ear right here. I can find that distance right there, make a good decision about that. I'm not going to put it here. I'm not going to put it here. Right there is where it has to be, right over the top of that eye. And this one wraps around to even with the top of the ear, and it's a little bit wider than the side of the eye right here. Okay, it comes past the side of the eye a little bit. So here's past the side of the eye, even with the top of the ear. And these lines are pretty much parallel. They're kind of the same kind of a curve to them. So I'm going to draw it that way. Same thing over on this side, right over the middle. Look at this one, straight across from here, straight across there, right over the center of the eye. and wraps around just the same as this other one does. Comes around about even with the top of the ear and stays parallel with the top of that eye. Nice little curve right there. Now the last thing I have to put on here is the neck, and I have to make sure that I keep this neck the proper length here. Okay, notice here, how many of you can tell me right now how long I have to make this neck? Do you see something up here that I can compare it to? Good, I'm glad to see that. What do you got?
Between the mouth, bottom of the mouth and the bottom of the neck, same as the...
Right, this space right here?
Yeah.
Very good, excellent. This space and this length are the same. So if they're the same here, they have to be the same on mine. That's exactly right. So I'm going to come down this amount of space down to about here somewhere with the bottom of this neck. Now I just need to find the starting and the ending points of those lines. I know how long they are. This one, if I go straight up, I'm right under the middle of this nostril. So come straight down from the middle of that nostril, right there. Notice how that line curves outward a little bit as it comes down. It angles out toward the outside a little bit. So I'm going to come down to there. There's my mark. And angle that out, just a slight little curve to it. This one is right about underneath the edge of this nostril. Okay, there's the edge of that nostril straight down right there. This one curves the other way and gets a little bit wider here at the bottom. It's going to be right about in there. Should be very good. Okay. Alright. Now, I have everything in place. My two little things here compare pretty well in terms of proportion and so on. They look very much the same. Now I'm at a point in my drawing where I want to for sure check everything over and just make sure and see if there's anything at all that I need to change. And then if not, then I'm at a point now where I go back over this drawing and I carefully make all of my lines darker and finish up this drawing. The last thing I do then is to shade in those pupils. So if yours is correctly done and you don't have to make any changes at all, then you're doing the same thing that I'm doing right here. You're going back over those very light lines that you made. You're getting them nice and crisp and clean, and hopefully you drew light enough so that you really don't have to do any erasing at all. I'm going to have a few marks showing on mine yet because I have to, I have to draw a little darker for this video to pick it up. I don't like having to do that, but I don't have any choice here. So my drawing isn't going to be as crisp and as clean as yours is. I've got some extra stuff showing here. If you have to turn the paper at all while you're making things darker to accommodate an angle and so on there, just do so. Do anything at all that works for you to get this thing in place. Notice your pencil now is getting duller as we've gone through this process. And by going over these lines and making them darker, it's getting even duller. So you're winding up with a nice flat edge on your pencil. That'll work out great when it comes time to go in here now and start to color in and shade in these pupils here. So the final step then in your drawing is to clean it up and crisp it up and make the lines darker, get your shading finished. Before you do any of that, make sure that you check and make any corrections necessary before you start making things darker. Now remember, you're not a Xerox copy machine. You can't make an exact duplicate of things. But you can come very, very close, and your challenge to yourself as you do these drawings is to do exactly that. Make as good a reproduction as you possibly can. And of course, the more you practice, better you're going to get. Not necessarily quicker. We don't care about speed, but we're talking about you're going to get better at describing things and marking some things down. Okay, I'm going to leave this on the screen here and let this run for just a little bit, and you just take an extra minute or so here to do whatever you have to do to finish this up. If you're finished, just wait there quietly. Now, one thing I want to mention to you before I shut this thing off here is a great way to practice drawing is to figure and do the same puzzle over and over again, to redo the same drawing a couple of times. Guaranteed that the second and the third and the fourth time you do something, the better it is. Many times when I do drawings of anything, whether it's people or buildings or automobiles or whatever, sometimes the first drawing doesn't always come out. You know, you need to refigure some things and redo some things a little bit. So sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times, but each time you do it, you learn something and you become a little bit better at what it is you're doing. Think about those of you that play basketball. What'd you do? Did you shoot one free throw back in the 3rd grade and then that's it? You never practice those anymore? That's all you have to do? Baloney, you have to redo that thing over and over and over again to reinforce those skills. Same thing is true with drawing. The more you do, the more you draw, the better you get, and the more you draw the same thing, the better results you get, and the more you learn from that particular object and those particular shapes. So there are times in here where I'm going to ask you to redo the same drawing a couple of times for that very reason, just for practice purposes, to make you better. All right, this morning our subject matter is going to be this character here, and I will set it up here so you can see it along also. And now I also have a smaller copy of it here that I'll put on screen and point out things as we go. This copy was made from this, just shrunken down on the machine so that everything is in proportion. So this is exactly the same as the one that you're looking at right here. Again, with this character, we have a lot of irregular kinds of shapes that we need to be concerned about and measure the width and the height of and so on and make some comparisons with. Before we get going with it, we will do the same as we do with everything else. We'll just kind of look some things over and decide what we might want to start with here. What would you say? Who's got an idea here about what might be a good shape here or a good thing to start with? What do you think?
I think the oval.
Okay, that large oval shape right here looks to be the largest shape of the bunch, plus all the others are either inside of it or attached to it and so on. So we're going to want to probably start with that. First thing we would do then is measure the height and the width of this thing and compare them. What do you get? How high is this thing compared to how wide it is? You can kind of just tell by looking at it. But a quick measuring will tell you for sure here. What do you got?
The length is what twice the height of the width.
Okay, it sure looks like that to me. It looks like the distance across here is equal to half of this, or it takes 2 of the widths in order to make the height. So when we get going with this thing here in a little bit, we'll start with that and we'll make an oval that's twice as high as it is wide. Things will go from there. Now let's just kind of quickly point out some other stuff here. Here we are right on the center of the oval for the top of this beak. Here we go about halfway down to the bottom for the bottom of that beak. How far into the beak is this little corner, or excuse me, how far into the oval is this little corner right here? How far in are we going? What do you think? No, I think you...
Not 1/4 of it?
Okay, I think it might be a little more than 1/4. Okay, this would be halfway across. Looks like if I go, I'd be from here to here, there to there, about 1/3, okay? About 1/3 of the way across, and that'll help me out lining up the eye here a little bit later. Look at how the back of the eye, corner of the beak, the front of the neck are pretty much all in a straight line right here. How long is this line at the top? How long is that line? Do you see anything else up here about the same size as that? Same dimension as that? This line across here. What do you think?
It's about the width of the center.
Sure, right across the middle of the oval shape. This and this need to be the same, so that'll help me out getting all this stuff in place. All right? Top of the eye is about a quarter of the way down. I think we're pretty well set here, but remember now, you always want to do this when you get ready to start a drawing, whether it's a simple little cartoon drawing like this or whether it's a more detailed drawing. You need to just take a few minutes to look over the shapes and kind of describe to yourself a little bit what it is you're going to be doing, make a decision as to where you're going to start, and go from there. All right, now on our paper we need to make sure, let's everybody try to draw this a little bit larger today. Let's see if we can expand the size of this thing a little bit. So our job is going to be to recreate these shapes exactly as we see them, only today we're going a little bit bigger. We've already decided that this thing is twice as high as it is wide right here. All right? So what we need to do is make sure that we allow for this, we allow enough room on the bottom here for the neck so we don't run out of some space here. All right. So first thing I'm going to do is just mark where I want the top of the head to be and where I want the bottom of this head or this oval shape to be right here. And I think on my paper, those marks will allow enough room for me to add the neck on the bottom here and be all right. So I'm going to be going fairly large here. All right, I need to take half this amount. I'm wondering if I'm going a little bit too big here on mine. I'm going to move this up just a little bit because I've got to allow, I need a room for that beak and the thing on the back. I'm going to shorten this up just a little bit right here. Make sure I don't run off the paper. All right. Remember now, on video here, I have to make these marks dark so you can see them. You try real hard today to keep things as light as you possibly can. All right. Now I'm going to take half this amount, and that's how wide this oval shape needs to be. And we'll put a little mark there, and one again on this side. And I see no reason why we can't just go ahead and set that oval in place. It's just a nice gentle curve all the way around. I'm going to draw it all the way right through where the beak is and erase that later. Or if I would be able to draw it lightly enough, I wouldn't even have to erase it. Remember when we do the drawing of these curved shapes, we try to break them up and take one little part at a time. Don't try to draw the whole thing at once. Let's try to balance this off. This is a symmetrical shape. It has the same shape on both sides. Keep it very light. Very important that this shape is done exactly right because everything else we do is based upon this shape now. Everything is attached to it or is inside of it, and this thing determines the size of everything else we do as well. All right? Okay, so take a little bit extra time at the beginning to make sure that shape is exactly the way you want it. That first shape is very, very crucial. Keep yours light now. Work real hard at that. Grip that pencil up away from the end there. Just enough pressure to so that you can keep control. All right. I think a good thing for us to do next would be this, probably this little beak area out here. Well, let's just mark some of the stuff down we need to do with that. We said a little while ago that the top of that beak is right in the center on the side of our oval over here on the right side. So let's put a little mark right there. Keep yours real light right now so that it'll just disappear a little bit later. Excuse me, the bottom of that beak is about halfway down to the bottom here, so we need to do that, mark that off. And we discussed a little bit ago and figured that this point right here on the back corner of the smile right here is about 1/3 of the way across the oval at that particular point. So I need to come about down, not quite halfway down. Look at here. I come between these 2 points that I just marked. I'm going to go not quite halfway down and then across about 1/3 of the way. So not quite halfway down, half would be there, not quite half would be right there, and then about 1/3 of the way across will put me right in that area right there for the back corner of that beak. Okay. How far out is this point? Who could tell me that? How far out am I going to put this point right here? I can see that it's right straight across from the first one that I made, straight across there. How far out is it going to go in comparison to maybe the size of this oval right here? What do you think? If I don't get this point in the right place, I'm going to wind up with a beak that's too short or one that's too long. How far out is this going to go? What do you think? 1/3 of what? Talking about this point. How far is this point away from here? Any ideas? What do you got? Looks like it, doesn't it? If you measure from here to here, that's what you need to do. If you want to find out how far something is away from something else, measure that and then go compare it to something else you've already done. We've already done that. Look at that. They're exactly the same. So if they're the same here, then we need to make them the same over here. So I'm going to take this width. That's how far out from this point that the end of that beak needs to be right there. It's straight across. These are straight across from each other right here. Now I'd like to show you something here on when we're drawing a line that's just slightly curved. When we do a line that's just slightly curved such as this, the easiest way to do this is to imagine a straight line across here. Just imagine a straight line. Kind of take a couple practice swings over that. Find the center of that and drop down just a little bit. Just a tiny little bit. Making a good decision as to how much of a curve there is there. This thing is almost straight. So if I imagine a straight line and then just drop it down, now I have my point with which to pass through. If I take a little practice swing over that, I can set the top line of that beak in place pretty well. Alright, here we have again, this is almost a straight line. If I drew a straight line from this point out to the end of the beak, I'd be very close to this curved line that I have to draw. So again, imagine that as a straight line out there. Find the middle of that, drop away from it just enough, make a good decision about that, and then again, curved line underneath here. Alright, these on the inside here are also almost straight lines. They have just slight curves to them. So address it the same way. Imagine a straight line, move off the center just a little bit, and the same thing right here. This one is really almost straight. Just a tiny little bit of a curve to it. Set that in place. And then if yours is done nice and lightly, this line won't even show in here later on. But if you think you need to, we could get it out of there now and just alleviate a little bit of confusion there. Alright, we have the beak shape in. And look at here. Now I have another curved line that runs right through the center of this. And here's a real good way when you run into this every now and then. The space here is the same as here, and the space here is the same as here, and so on. So before I draw that line, I'm just going to just slide through here and carefully just divide that space halfway all the way through. And there's just absolutely no problem setting that line in there. I'm marking a whole bunch of points along the way is all it amounts to. And make sure that I'm splitting that right up the middle here. Okay. Alright. Let's do the eye up here. I think that eye shape would be fairly easy to do right here. Top of it is about halfway down between the very top of the oval and the top corner of the beak. Top of the oval, top corner of the beak, halfway down, right in that area. Where's the back of this thing? What's that even with?
Back of the beak.
Yep. Okay, that's good. That's all I need. It's right even with the back of the beak right here. That's where I have to put it. right in this area. Okay, and now here we have one of those small little areas right here that we just have to make a good decision about. Bottom of that eye is just up a little ways from the top of the beak. I'm not going to put it here, that'd be stupid. I'm not going to put it over here somewhere. I can make a decision as to right there seems to be a good intelligent spot to put that. Right, this thing is kind of an oval shape again, and the front part of this big oval takes care of this side of it. Now I come out of here, comes out of here kind of straight for a little bit. Just kind of comes out of here almost at a right angle, and then drops off very quickly. Kind of swing over that a little bit a few times down here, and then it drops fairly straight down here, curves in toward the front just a little bit in this area, and then around and up into there, into that mark that we made. Right? So just take each little part of that. Anytime you're dealing with a curved shape, take just a little part of it at a time and see what it's doing for you there. As long as we're here, let's put the pupil in there. We're in the center right here, and we're pretty much in the center of the bottom of the eye, and this outside edge runs about parallel with the outside edge of the eye itself, so we just kind of stay about the same distance away all the way through here. Set that into place. Of course, we're not going to shade that in yet until we're finished. Alright, now not a whole lot else to do here. We've got the little feathers on the back of the head here and the neck to put in. Let's go after these characters up here. Somebody said a little while ago when we were looking this thing over that this line at the top up here was the same length as the distance across the center of the oval. And that's exactly right. If you measure that, whether right on top of it like I am or from a distance, we can see that those are the same. So I need to take this distance right here, set it right across from the top, and that's where this back point will be. That will keep this in proportion with everything else. Of course, that's just a straight line across there. I suppose we could just go ahead and set that in right across the top. All right. Now these other two horizontal lines, this one and this one, end right underneath that one. That's great to know. I need to know where they are in terms of along the side of the head right here. I would hope that everybody in here could tell me how I could find that point. What do you got? Very good. Just straight across on top of the eye. If that's where it is there, that's where it has to be here. And now I can find the end of that one pretty easily, right straight underneath the other one here and straight across from there. So I can set that into place pretty well. And then the easiest way to find this point, I could go over here and I could say, okay, let's see, I'm straight across from, well, right about this point on the eye right here. It's about straight across from that. That's one way to find it. Someone else might say, hey, this space and this space are the same. So whatever works for you, do that. But it should wind up right across from there, and these two spaces should be the same, regardless of what method you use to figure that out. Again, this point is right under these and right across from that. Now I can get these other two horizontal lines in place. Okay. Well, what about these points right here? How am I going to figure out where they are? I know they're in the center between, for example, this one's in the middle but across this space, but where is it this way? How can I find out where to put it this way? Do you have any idea? What do you think? From where? Like from here halfway across, you mean? I don't think so. I think it's a little bit less than, if I go from here halfway to here, you're saying? I guess it seems to be less than that. I think halfway would put me right about there. Okay, so what do you think? Probably about a third of the way would be good. If I go from here to there to there again, that gets me really close to that thing. Someone else might say, hey, if you would measure and take the same distance across the eye, that's going to get you pretty close to that. All right. I think maybe going a third of the way across here will do it. If I came in the middle here, so if I come a third of the way across, that'll be right about in there. Okay. That'll work just fine. The other one, of course, is right straight underneath that in the center here. And now, these are just some straight lines that should be pretty easily placed here. All right. Staying caught up fairly well here? Anybody behind at all? Very good. All right. Well, we have a neck to do. Tell me something about the neck. What do you got? Anything at all? I have to mark 4 points here. I have to figure out where they are and make sure this is the right length, getting it the right width and so on. Tell me something.
Well, the line is walk straight with the beak and the eye.
Okay, very good. I need to drop straight down under here for this point. That should be very easy to find, that one. Right there. Okay. I need to find 3 more. How far down do I go with this? Okay, this one's right straight under here. And this one's going to be straight across from that. What can I do? Somebody tell me something. I can't just throw this on here. I have to be able to describe where to put these. What do you got?
Well, from the beak, in that middle point, right there, there's, no, not there, out in the front, on that tip right here.
Yeah?
It's about from there down. It's about right here.
Oh, okay. You're going to compare this space to this right here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not a bad idea. Let's do that. I think if you would measure this from there to there, you'll find it to be just a little bit longer than what we need to do. Okay, they're not quite the same. This is just a little bit longer. Let's see if we can find another line up here that's about that length, a line that we've already drawn. See one somewhere? Adam? Yeah, right up here. This thing, this line, and this line look to be the same length. If we measure those, I think we'll find that out. Okay? Right, they're very close to being the same length right there. All right? So however long this one is, that's how long I need this one to be. And that'll get me down in the right place here. And now, that's no problem. Straight line right here. How wide is that neck? Where is this point over here? This one, where am I going to put that? What do you think? Here you talking about? Show me on your drawing which one you mean. You drew so lightly I can't see way over there. You're talking about this line?
Yeah.
Okay, from where that joins on? Yeah, I got to be over because that's right in the middle of the head, so that would put me right here. How does it line up with this one, as long as we were talking about that? If I go straight up, let's just do this. Whenever you're trying to find a point here, just go straight up and see what you get. If I keep going straight up here, I'm going to be, yeah, you're right, a little bit over from that. That gives me a point now to relate to on my own drawing. Okay, so I could find that point right there and come straight down. This distance across here is about as wide as what that we've already drawn?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about as wide as the eye. Look at that. This space and this space look the same. So that might be another good way to do this. There's always more than one way to figure out the size of something or the placement of something. All right? So you just need to, whatever it is you're drawing at a particular time, measure it, look at the size of it really hard or the length of it, and then compare it to something else. And if they're the same on your drawing, then you need to make them if they're the same on the model you're working from, you need to make them the same on your drawing. Now we have all the lines in place. Now, before we go and make these lines darker, mine are already pretty dark because I'm trying to get them to show up here on the screen, but before we go ahead and make yours darker, we need to do some comparing here. We need to make sure and just check and see if there's anything at all you need to move around or readjust at all, and then as soon as you're satisfied with the shapes and the arrangement and the proportion of things, then you're going to go back and go over those lines and make them nice and dark and crisp and clean and so on. Eventually, when we start to do some completed drawings, right now we're still just kind of working with outlines here and so on, and we're using these little cartoon characters to just as some practice material. What we need to have you understand is sometimes what we're going to do is you're going to do your drawing on paper just like this, and you're going to make some mistakes and some erasing, but then when you get everything arranged and all the major shapes in place, then what you do is you take this paper and you trace this onto another sheet so that you have everything nice and clean and no erasers on there and so on, no smudges and all that stuff. And then from there you continue your drawing and do your shading and put in your detail and so on. And it's always perfectly legal to trace your own work. And many artists will do that. They'll do all their sketching and all their figuring on one sheet, get everything arranged, and then trace it over to another sheet so that you have some nice clean paper and you don't have to worry about the smudges and the smearing and any made little marks that might be showing and so on. So we'll be getting to that a little bit later. Right now we don't need to do that. Okay, and the last thing we'll do, of course, is shade in that pupil carefully, and by now you should find your pencil getting a dull edge on it, which makes that pretty easy to do. There's no reflection in this eye, so we just color that whole shape in there. And spend just a little bit of time cleaning it up and getting it to a finished product here. Okay, as with any of our other drawings now, you notice that we have a pretty good job done here. Anything that we've accomplished, it's not because of any talent that we might have in regard to drawing. It's because we've carefully approached this thing from a standpoint of solving it as a puzzle, thinking about everything as lines and shapes, measuring, comparing, describing, lining things up with one another, carefully telling ourselves where things need to be placed. And if you have something that's out of place, it's very easily found and very easily fixed because of that. I'm going to have you exchange papers here right now. We're going to wait just a little bit and give you a chance to finish up. And we're going to exchange papers, and you're going to correct someone else's paper from the standpoint of comparing again and seeing if you can find a mistake. As you're getting these darker now, just from here I can see a couple of mistakes, but they're going to be easily fixed because they're going to be very easily recognized as you start comparing and checking again on someone else's work. Remember now, don't mark anybody else's paper when we do this. If you have yours finished and someone else at your table is also finished, would you just exchange with that person and just take a minute or so to look it over? You have the large one here to compare it to and see if you can find something wrong, and if so, just tell them what it is. And if someone points out a mistake to you, then fix it up. If you agree with them, fix it up. Our little character this morning is going to be this little dog, line drawing of this little face of this dog. I don't know what kind of dog this is, a cross between Goofy and Pluto or somebody here. I'm not real sure who this is. What's the first thing we do? As with any of our other drawings now, what's the first thing we're going to do?
Measure and
Even before that, well, yeah, I guess we're going to do some of that. But even before we start diddling with any lines at all on the paper, what do we do?
color something that's not
Pardon?
don't think that it's a dog.
Okay, that's number one item. Forget about the dog right here. Forget about noses and ears and eyes and a dog and that sort of thing, or we're going to wind up drawing our own concept of what's here, and we'll have a tendency to look less at what it is that we're doing. What I want you to say here, we're going to just take some time to kind of look this over a little bit and find out how some of these shapes relate to one another, and just take a few minutes that will help us kind of actually speed things up for us a little bit later on as we go. Starting this thing right here, looks between top and bottom that when I get all finished, this little area across the top of the nose, this little muzzle part of this character right here is going to be right in the center between top and bottom. I have a fairly large shape here. This one is kind of centrally located. I think I'm going to start with this shape right here and see what I can do with that. And then just kind of build out from that a little bit. The eyes are about halfway between here and the top of the head. The ears seem to be about the same length as this whole part. Once I get this whole part done, the ears will be that same length and so on. Neck hangs down a little bit lower than the bottom of the ears. Look at how the nose takes up about half of this space through here. Look at how the nose and this little part on the bottom of the mouth right here are the same width. They line up with each other. Top of the ears, top of the eyes are pretty much in the same area. The head shape right across here is a tiny little bit narrower than this muzzle part right here on this character. So that's how we have to have things wind up as we do this. Let's start with this shape right across here. Let's just kind of think of this as an oval shape. We'll put that little dent in there in the middle later on. Let's just think about this right here. Notice that it's wider than it is high. I need to know how much right here. So we're going to measure that. Start out by measuring that and measure across. Compare that. Looks to be about 1.5 times as wide as it is high. That's how wide it is. I need about half that amount again added on over here. Okay, now we have to on our paper be careful as we mark these first shapes down so that we're not going to run out of space. We want to do a fairly large drawing, but at the same time make sure we have room for all the stuff that we're going to add on to this shape as we go here. I'm going to put some marks here. I'm going to start right here, and this is where the top of that little nose shape is going to be right there. And I'm going to go about to here with this bottom of that thing. Okay. Now I need to take that amount of space plus half of that again, and that's how wide this is going to be. So I'm going to move over about to here. Okay, I'm going to take this amount of space, move over just a little bit more, this amount of space, and then half that amount again, and that's how wide that little muzzle shape is going to have to be. Notice on the top of this thing how flat it is across the top. It's not exactly an oval right here. It seems to be much flatter at the top. And so I need to recognize that. So I'm going to just start out by just kind of flattening across the top of this thing right here. Get that into place. And then the sides of this drop off rather fast. Around the side it's almost kind of a cross between an oval and a rectangle here is what it is with this little shape. And then the sides down here at the bottom angle in a little bit more. Notice how they're much rounder than the corresponding area at the top of this shape. Notice how we just describe everything. Everything is carefully looked at and kind of put into words. That's why when you're drawing you need to be concentrating all the time. You're just constantly working on describing what it is that you're doing so that you can put it down exactly as you see it. And as with every other drawing that you do, be very careful with the first shape, first couple of large shapes. They need to be done very well, or everything else is going to be out of place. Everything has to attach to those. All right, once I get that shape into place, right here in the bottom, right in the very center, there's just this little kind of dip up in here. So I'm going to find the middle on the bottom of mine and just carefully place that little dent in the bottom right here. Make sure that it's centered. Get rid of my mark down here. Again, now today, try to draw very lightly and keep your marks and things as small as you can get them. I have to make mine darker and bigger up here for it to show up on video. Alright, let's take a look at the head part of this character. In comparison to the part that we just drew, of course I can see that it's higher than that. Well, let's find out how much. I'm going to just measure right here, take that amount and set it up, and it looks like, well, let's just see how I compare this way. If I take the width of this and set it up here, I need just a little bit more. Look at that. If I take this width and set it up here, I need just a little bit more. All right, let's do that. Take the width, set it up here, and then I need just a little bit more. And mark that. All right, that'll give me the height for this portion right here. And now, we said that when we were looking this over earlier, that the sides of this thing are a little bit narrower than this first shape that we drew. So here's the width of that first shape. So if I just move in here just a little bit, make this just a tiny little bit narrower. Not very much. It's just a little bit narrower. And then basically the sides of this thing pretty much come straight down. They bend in just a little bit right at the very bottom. So I'm going to come straight down and go in just a little bit. Over here, come straight down and go in just a little bit. And I think I came in a little bit too much on this side. I'm going to move that back. Move those back out just a little bit. All right. Now I have the beginning points for this head shape, top, and I know that it gets just a little bit wider, really not very much as it goes up. Actually, no, this does not really get very much wider at all. I'm going to move this one back in a little bit right here. Okay? Never hurts to just double check some things before we get going with lines. The lines are one of the mistakes that people make when they draw is they just get caught up with the lines too fast, and they just get caught up with the making of those lines too fast. Make sure that you're going to be putting them in the right place. Now I think we can set in a pretty good head shape right here. Coming up the side, fairly straight up the side, a little bit of a curve to it. A little kind of a knob on the top of the head here, it kind of wraps around pretty fast. And then fairly straight down this side here also, turns in just a little bit here at the bottom. Alright, these are our two main shapes in this drawing. Everything else attaches now or goes directly inside of these. So before you move on, make sure that you're happy with what you have there, because everything else is based on these shapes. Kind of like the foundation of the house or the main walls in the house, everything is going to be attached to them. If we're building a house, we have to have all those things in the right place or nothing else will fit. Okay, now things should start to get a little bit easier for us here. Let's go, the order in which we would do things doesn't really matter a whole lot here. Let's put the eyes in. They're going to be pretty easy. Remember, we want to do easy things. Things that are easy. Let's do those as soon as we can. Top of the eyes, where are they?
About halfway of that whole.
You bet. Halfway up through this section right here. So let's just kind of, you can lightly put a really light line across here. I'm going to put a line on here so light it will not show up on video, but I'm going to be able to see it. Okay? That's what you want to do. You want to draw so lightly that you can just barely see it from where you are. And I'm going to make it a little darker here now, just these parts of it anyway. Top of the eyes are going to go up to there. Okay, in the center right here, we have a little split between the eyes. And so let's find the center here and put just a sensible sized little split right there. And now, if I go from here, inside corner of this eye, how far across do I have to go here to find the other side? What do you think? I guess I don't know. If I go to, okay, if I start right here and go to here, I'll be halfway across. That'll give me the edge of that pupil. I need to go about 3/4 of the way across between these 2 points to find the other side of this eye. So here we go. Here's the corner. Go 3/4 of the way across. Mark it there. The one on the other side is the same size. Again, about 3/4 of the way across. Okay. And now I think I can carefully set these eyes into place. They're pretty much straight up and down. They angle outward maybe just a tiny little bit. It'd be great if I could get that kind of a look to them. Just have them angling out just a little bit. Don't try to draw them all at once. Draw about half of that shape at a time. Practice swing over the top. Get these set up over here. And just kind of watch those little shapes fall into place. Solving this puzzle right here. All right. The pupils in here, within the eye, again, top of them about halfway up, inside the eye area, that shape that we just drew. And it looks like those pupils, widthwise at the bottom here, take up about the middle half of that space across the bottom of the eye. Like if I go a fourth of the way across and then half, another fourth and another fourth and so on, they fill up the middle 2/4, or the middle half of that eye space right there. And again, they're just kind of a nice little partial oval shape. One on the other side is the same, takes up the middle half of that section, leaving about a fourth of it on each side, a fourth of that space. And we set those in there. Now someone who tells you they don't know how to draw, the only reason they would draw these incorrectly is because they would not be measuring and recognizing the fact that these things go halfway up and take up the middle half of that space and so on. They would not be describing things. So if someone tells you they don't have any talent or they can't draw, don't believe them. All they're telling you is they don't know how to solve this puzzle. They don't know how to take the time to describe and measure and line things up. That's what enables us to put these things in place. We have these two little tiny reflections up here. We can see they're toward the top and they're very small and they're centered in here, so they can very easily be just placed right there, sensibly arranged. All right. Let's go down in this muzzle shape, this mouth part of this character right here. Bottom of the nose, when we talked about this thing earlier, we said is halfway between top and the bottom of that shape. So let's mark that. Be crazy to put it anywhere else. How wide is that nose? What do you got for width? What can you compare it to? What can you line it up with? Okay. Got to hang up the sign. It's all right. What do you got?
It's about a fourth of the way in on the eye.
Okay, it lines up with the side of the pupil, right? If you go straight up, right here, side of the pupil, right here, side of the pupil. So that takes care of that. All we need to do is look as to how it lines up with other things. You're right, 1/4 of the way in the eye. And that's where that is, 1/4 of the way in the eye. Okay, very good. Now here we have a kind of an oval, circular type shape again. Stays flat across the top up here. Drops out. Look where it drops out of here. Right about out of the middle of the pupil is where it comes out up there. And so that's where we'll drop it out of there. And now that thing just fall right into place there. We have it all marked so well that we could go get a little kindergarten kid, put that in there. Almost like connecting the dots. It's kind of what you're doing. I hate to kind of relate it to that, but when you draw, you're kind of creating connected dot drawings. You're figuring out where all the dots go. Those are the marks you're putting down, and then it's just a matter of putting the lines in. Now we just have a straight line right out of the middle of the nose, straight down to that little crease that we put in there a little while ago. We can kind of set that in, and we see our little dog starting to take shape here. Let's put on the this little mouth part right here, the little jaw down here. All right. Well, I think we mentioned a little while ago, it's just about as wide as the nose, maybe just a tiny, tiny little bit narrower than the nose is up there. All right. So I'm going to come down and make it just a little bit narrower. Put a mark there and put a mark right there. Right. How far down does this go? How thick is this space right here? Anybody have any ideas? What can you compare that to? Is that about the same as anything we've done, or half the size of anything we've done? how far down are you? If I don't figure this and describe this space, how big it is compared to everything else here, and mark it accordingly, I'm going to wind up with a great big jaw down here, or a little flat one, and it's not going to look the same. What do you got?
Half the size of the nose.
Great. Half the size of the nose. It just looks like that. And if you're not sure, you can measure that and you find it out. It's half the width of that nose. So there's the amount of space I need. Right there is going to be a good, intelligent decision for that. This thing curves, got almost like a part of a circle right here. Curves in very quickly. Drops off over here. And again, we'll draw that in two little pieces right here rather than try to do it all at once. All right, here comes our little guy. He's shaping up on the paper here. Seems to be coming fairly well. Looks like a little grasshopper there now. Let's, we have the eyebrows to do. They'll be very easy. Let's put them in there. Okay. The ends of each of these things are about as wide as the eye. I think I'm going to need to make a good decision as to how high to make them right here. This space right here is fairly similar to this space right here, maybe just a little bit wider. And so I'll look at that space and maybe make it just a little bit wider. That looks like a pretty good spot for that. I mean, they don't belong up here, I can see that. They're not really close. This is a good decision as to how much space I need there. And then these little points right here are right even, pretty much even with the top of the eye. So I need one right here, straight across, right there. All four of those are pretty much straight across from each other. And these things run pretty much parallel with the top of the eye. So we'll get those set in place, I think, there pretty easily. But carefully, no matter how easy something might be, we want to carefully mark it, get things set in before we just throw some lines in there. All right, earlier we said the ears come out to be about the same length as the distance from the bottom of the, right from this mouth area right here to the top of the head. If I measure them right here, we'll find that out. They're very close to being that same distance right there. All right, so that's how long, this is how long my ears need to be right here on this character. Where do they start? Very easily described. Yep, right across from that eyebrow area right there. Let's mark this one down. We might as well just slide straight across and mark the other one while we're there. All right, now I need to take this amount of space right here, and however size you're drawing yours, you take that same amount of space and just set it right over here, and that's how far down they need to go. All right, so I'm going to put a little mark right there, and of course they're straight across from each other, so I'll come straight across over here, carefully mark that. Let's find these little marks right here. How can I find these? How can I find decide where to put these right here? Okay, they're pretty close right here. What might I do?
They're about half in where the little slit is in there, it's about half in there.
Talking about lining it up this way?
Yeah.
Okay, just look here. If I go straight up, I'm right underneath that area of the eye right there. Okay, that's going to line me up pretty well. All right, I need this little bit of space right in here. Okay, and it's going to be just the same amount of space on the other side. Just need to set that in. It's kind of starting to take shape there. How wide are these ears? I've got to decide how far out to make a little mark for this line to pass through out here, so I don't make this too wide. I can't have real skinny little Pluto looking ears here, and I can't have these great big wide things. How far out? How far out is this going to go here? Any ideas?
About the width of the nose.
Okay, this part right here, do you think? Okay. All right, down here it is. You bet it is, right there. That's great. Take that and that. Those are the same. Okay, I'm going to do that. I like that. I didn't really notice that. I wasn't thinking of that part of it right there. That's very good. Okay, and the one on the other side is the same. So let's do that again. Just take that amount, set it right over here. That gives me a mark down here at the bottom. That's pretty good. It does pretty much go straight up. It gets a little bit gets a little bit wider up in this area. It comes out just a little bit farther to the right, and over here, pretty much straight up, maybe out just a little bit more right out over there. Okay, now look at those ears. We could go out on go downtown Melrose and pull anybody off the street who's never done a drawing in their lives, and they could take a look at this now and finish these ears. We've got the beginnings and ends, and we've got everything marked real well. Let's go ahead and draw those in. They drop off here rather fast, and then they're pretty straight on the sides, nice and rounded at the bottom. So let's just kind of treat each part of that carefully as we go here, and set that down here, straight down pretty much on the side. Now we start to taper in a little bit, quickly round it off here at the bottom. And there's that little character falling into shape over there. We've taken good care to mark down where we want things to be here. So now what we need to do is, let's just take that little extra effort, little extra time to make sure we're recreating that same line. Take some practice swings there. Look at that line carefully, straight down over here on this side. Describe things as we go. All right. Okay. Well, all we have left is a little scrawny little neck here. Really shouldn't be too tough. If I go, I can probably make just a pretty good decision here if I'm going straight up. Width-wise right here, looks like, look at here, the width of this and the width of the pupil are about the same. Okay, so I need to be about that thick for my neck right here, and of course it's just centered underneath here. Not too tough at all. I need to be careful how long I make these. They come down just a little bit lower than the bottom of the ear. What if I would just measure this neck and compare it to an eye? It's about the size of an eye right there. Let's see how that works out for us here. There's about the size of an eye. That brings me down a little bit lower than the ear. Should be pretty good. Notice how the neck curves out, gets a little bit wider here at the bottom, widens out. So I need to be about there, and I need to be right about there. Okay, never just throw the line in. You're always marking where you're going to end up with that thing. Give yourself a target to aim at as you're doing that line. A little bit of a curve and so on. Now I believe we have all the parts down here. We've got everything in place pretty well. Now, before we start finishing this up and making our lines dark, we're going to just take a quick check, see if there's anything at all that we would like to change a little bit. On mine up here, I'm looking at, it's pretty good the way it is right here. I see two things that I'm going to change. Okay, I'm going to be real fussy with this. Right here, it looks to me, I'll get them both on the screen here, this tapers too much right here. It kind of slants too much. This rounds a little bit more over here. Now notice, look at here, I'm not going to erase that right away. I'm going to move out from that, use it as a guide, and now I'm going to put the new line in over here. I'm going to round that out just a little bit more. All right? I'm going to be very fussy with some things here. Also, it looks to me like these little spaces right here, compared to what I see here, are a little bit too small. So I either need to narrow this up a little bit. I think that's what I'll do. I'm going to just kind of trim in that mouth just a little bit. And I'll go back and get the original ones out of there. If I were not drawing on video, I wouldn't have to do that. I wouldn't have to erase the first ones because they'd be so light that they would just disappear into the wilderness eventually there. All right? So whatever little repairs you might have to make, go ahead and do so. And then, of course, our final step is to come back over your lines, make them darker, clean them up a little bit, and cover over any little marks that you have there. Now, earlier today we talked about tracing a little bit, and this might be a situation now if we were going to do a completed drawing of this thing and we wanted to make sure that we had no smudges and erasure marks and those kinds of things on here. What we might do right now is just take this and very carefully trace it to another piece of paper and then continue on from there to eliminate all the other, get rid of all the little things that we caused down here by some of the mistakes that we made. Perfectly legal to trace your own work under those circumstances. Again, we don't have a whole lot of shading to do in this character. Just those little eyes up there. This is just kind of a line drawing, and we're going to leave it as such. Now, when we first looked at this thing today, it looked like a fairly complicated pile of shapes, and I have to admit to you that it really is. This is this is a fairly complicated arrangement with regard to shapes and how they line up. But we treated it as everything else, just lines and shapes, and we did the describing carefully and the lining up of things very carefully. And because of that, I think we're getting a pretty good job done here with arranging these things on our own paper. We've made it a different size, and yet we've kept everything in proportion pretty well. Because of all that effort that we put into measuring and lining up. Last thing we do then, get in there with that dull pencil and do the shading. Right now our shading amounts to just coloring in some very dark areas. Eventually we'll be getting to doing some shading where we'll be dealing with various shades of gray, using different amounts of pressure on the pencil. And then our drawings are going to start to look a little bit more three-dimensional. Right now this drawing looks pretty flat, and it is kind of flat looking. Little cartoon drawings usually look very flat. But we'll get to eventually working with things so that we can put some shadows in and make things look kind of rounded, make them look three-dimensional, add some depth to our drawings. Would like you to take whatever time you need here now to finish yours up and get it to a completed stage. And then, with the time that we have left this hour, I want you to continue with redrawing these characters. You're working on one of them now, maybe the monkey or maybe that bird that we did the other day is there. And continue with that. If you finish one of those, I want you to start either another one of that same, you can do a third one or even a fourth one of the same character if you want, or try one of the other ones here, redoing it a second time or a third time, whatever the case may be. But again, as you do these now, you're on your own the second time, figuring and lining things up, measuring things, and so on. And that's what we're emphasizing here with these video drawings. We want you to pay attention to the process by which we're arranging things on paper. Doing a good job of size today, so you're doing the size of this thing here. All right, today our subject matter is going to be this little pig character here. And again, we're going to start out by just taking a look at the general shapes here and see if we can describe a little bit about what we're going to be doing. We're going to start, of course, I would hope you would recognize the fact that we could start with this circular shape for the head. Circle is, again, a very easy shape to not only draw, but to recognize. And so if we can find things like squares, rectangles, and circles, we like to start with those. If we get that marked off, height and width the same, then we can, if we go right in the center of this thing, we're at the top of that little nostril thing there, and that little circle looks like it takes up, look at these three things here, about 1/3 from the middle of this thing down. We're just going to kind of break that into about thirds for this stuff through here. This little nostril thing is not quite a circle, it's a little bit wider than it is high. From there we can mark off the eyes. The space over the eyes is about a middle third of that nostril. go halfway up to the top here. Look at how the eyes here line up, or the ears line up with the eyes in this manner here, and across from right there. Kind of little peanut shapes out here. This should be kind of interesting to go after. This little collar here, or roll of fat, whatever it is parallel all the way along with the bottom. All of these little points here line up in a particular manner, and I think we'll be all right here. These little things right underneath here, this one right over there. All right, let's start out by marking off for that circle, and let's make sure that we're allowing room for attaching these other things to the circle. They don't stick out too far from the circle, so it shouldn't be too bad here. Let's go, I'm going to make mine probably like about the size of a softball or so. So we're going to mark the top and the bottom, and then we're going to take that amount and move it across here. And mark off the sides. Keep yours light now, very, very light. Now I'd like to just kind of show you one little thing here when you're drawing a circle that some people find to be helpful. If you can mark the exact center of that thing, and then we know from that point the radius of a circle is the same, which is the line, of course, from the center all the way out to the sides. So to maybe help me get a little mark right here so that I don't flatten this thing out too much, take a look at the screen up here. I'm just going to take this amount, set it over here, and get a little mark in this area, making sure that I'm keeping these distances the same all the way through here. If I come down here again, helps me get this thing in position, and over here, and up to here. And so we need to, if we can get a couple extra marks around there, we can just kind of see this circle fall into place. And then treat it as as maybe like 4 separate lines right here. And we just kind of take the practice swing over that. And if it's not a circle when you finish it, you can tell right away and very easily fix it up by removing any little dents or lumps that might be in there, or any parts that maybe we get to be a little bit too straight. There shouldn't be anything that's straight down here at all. Just a nice continuous curve all the way through here. And keep things really nice and light so that you can do that. You can go back and make some repairs without having to do a whole lot of erasing. Okay, now once we get that circle in place, everything either attaches to it or goes somewhere specifically inside of that. I think the smartest thing would be to do next would be that little nostril shape right here. And we mentioned a little while ago it starts right in the center. So we're going to mark the top of that. And we said that these 3 sections right here are approximately breaking this up into thirds right here. So let's do that. Let's just kind of come down, and we'll go 1/3 of the way down and 1/3 of the way down again. And if I mark these, now I have the bottom of the nose and the bottom of the mouth area right here marked. That's kind of where those are going to fall into place. If you look at this nostril, it's not a circle. It's a little bit stretched a little bit to the side. So if this is the height of it, I have to make it slightly more than that amount wide. Mark that off. And now again we have almost a circle here. It's a little bit of an elliptical shape, an oval shape. Get that set into place, but it should be proper size in relationship then to the rest of this circle. Well, let's do the eyes right here. The space between the eyes, these 2 little corners of the eye right here, are very, very close to that circle for the nostrils. It's a little bit above it, and the distance apart is such that they just kind of break that up into thirds underneath there. So if I go take the middle third of these of that small circle and just put a couple of marks right above that, I'll have the position for those eyes marked pretty well. Everything that we do in here is we ask ourselves, where is it? How big is it? Where is it in relationship to other things? What's right above it? What's right across from it? And you have to ask yourself those questions about everything that we're drawing right here. Top of the eyes, all right, I've got to mark that, so I need to know how far up they go. Well, they go halfway to the top of the head. We can see that pretty easily. So we're going up here halfway, marking this off over here. And now the outside corner of the eyes, we go from the inside corner, how far across? Halfway over to the side. Okay, all we're doing is going halfway across to the side here. So, and this point looks as if it's maybe just a tiny little bit lower than the one on the inside. This one is a little bit lower than this one, not much. So I'm going halfway across and down just a tiny little bit. One on the other side does pretty much the same thing. Maybe this one almost looks like it's a little bit less than halfway across, but again a little bit lower. So let's do that. That's pretty easily done. A little bit less than halfway across this space and a little bit lower. What about there? All right. Now that only takes me across the bottom of the eye right through here. It doesn't allow for this extra little wrinkle out here and so on. We'll add that on there a little bit later. Bottom of this eye is curved upward just a tiny little bit, and so is the one on the other side. It has just a little bit of an upward curve to it. I have to make my lines a little bit darker here, I guess, so you can see them a little better. And now we have the little kind of half oval shapes here for the eyes. See if we can lay those into place. And the one eye here on this eye is a little bit wider than this eye. It's the way they come out over here also. Just a tiny little bit. While we're there, we can set the pupils in place. Middle here, middle on the bottom, middle here, bottom. And we can set those in, and we have the little tiny reflections there up toward the top again, right in the very corners, just some tiny little oval shapes. We'll just set those in there. Take a minute or so here and allow you to catch up. If you are caught up with all the shapes, check them. It doesn't do any good to just sit there and stare at the ceiling. Check your shapes and see if there's any changes that you need to make, anything you can fix up at all before we go on here. Okay, next pretty large shape that we could deal with here is maybe this mouth area. Let's take a look at just these corners right here. I know it's going to fit into this space across here. This corner is just a tiny little bit past the side of the eye, and it's right across from, about I don't have the nostrils drawn in. It's going to be across from the bottom of the nostrils, about a third of the way up into this circle right here. So if I go a third of the way up there and across to just past the corner of the eye right here, I need a point right there. One on the other side also goes past the corner of the eye a little bit more. Goes a little bit more past the eye than this one did on this side. And they're about straight across from each other. So I go straight across until I'm a little bit right about underneath there. So I'm going to need a point right there. Should be pretty good. Top line of the mouth curved and touches right underneath the nose right there. And so we'll just swing it into there, swing it back up again to this side, and Drop this line down out of here. Take a couple little practice swings over that. Now I'm going to just kind of check here. It looks to me that the mouth right over here on this side kind of bows out a little bit more than what I have it. Mine is kind of flattened out over here. So I'm going to move that out. I'm just going to put a little mark there to kind of move that thing out. And yours might be just fine. Maybe yours turned out to be pretty good. But just kind of check and compare and see. You have the original right here you can kind of look at and see if yours needs any fixing up at all. We can't be copy machines. We can't do exact reproductions, but we can get close, and we can use our eyes and use our intelligence to make some adjustments and get these things pretty well done here. Sometimes we make some mistakes. Just need to go back and fix them up a little bit. Well, let's. We've got some little lines, little smile lines to put in here yet. We've got some eyebrows over the top. We've got this little wrinkle on the side of the eye here. Let's continue these little lines right here. This one comes just a continuation of this line, keeps the same curve going, and it stops just past the corner of the mouth right there. Okay, so I'm going to continue this curve until I'm just a little bit past the corner of the mouth on this side. And over here I'm going to continue this curve until I'm, again, a little bit past the corner of the mouth over here. I'll be right about in that area. Bring that through about over to there. Alright, let's put the little smile lines on there. This one is right straight under the corner of the eye and right straight across from this thing. That's pretty easy to find. Straight across from there, right underneath the corner of the eye. This one is straight across from pretty much maybe a little bit lower than the corner of the mouth and a little bit past this point. So a little bit past there, a little bit lower than the corner of the mouth. Should be right about in that area for these 2 points. And now, fat little curve right through the corner of the mouth right there. Let's go to the other side. Straight across from there. Straight underneath the corner of the eye. Straight down, straight across. Needs to be right there. Right. This one, from the corner of the mouth, made a little mark on my pig here. From the corner of the mouth to the side of the face, we're going more than halfway over, and it's a little bit lower than the corner of the mouth. All right? So a little bit lower and a little more than halfway over. Should be right about there. And now we can draw that curved line in through that corner of the mouth. Let's put those 2 little nostrils in there. Both circles. They're centered crosswise through the middle of this thing. Notice this space here and the space between and the space here are all about the same. Space above and below are about the same. It's like the center of these things is right underneath the corner of the eye. I think we can just kind of intelligently mark those into place right here. Kind of set them in crosswise, and then being circles, we know how high they need to be. They're the same height and width all the way through. We just kind of get some marks in there, whatever helps you get those into place. But you need these 2 little bullet holes right here, right in that particular position, in that size. And we shade those in later. We may as well finish up the lines inside this big circle. Let's go ahead and go right just a tiny little bit above the top of the eye, right in the center here. And then we wrap around, to right about this point right here. We stay above the pupil of the eye, right at that point. And we have a parallel line right here, parallel with the top of the eye. Go over on this side, right there. Come around the side over here. These lines are very much the same length, and bottom of this one is right across from that one, right there, parallel with the top of the eye. Okay. Well, we got a little basketball here with a face on it. Let's see if we can attach some of these things around the outside. Probably the very easiest thing to do would be this little collar-like shape underneath here. Let's mark where that begins. Of course, it's right across from the mouth on each side, so we need to get that down there. Thickness-wise, how can I figure out how thick this is? Stays the same thickness all the way through. How thick is that? How am I going to figure that out? What do you think? Any ideas?
Maybe like a third, like from the bottom of the mouth to the chin.
Okay. About half of that. Very good. Look at that. If I go to the middle of that, this space is the same as this space. Okay, and that's exactly I can't think of a better way to do that. Go to the middle there, mark off that amount of space below, right here. And now I have a parallel line all the way along here. This thickness stays the same all the way through here. So I need to come here and all the way up the side here. And we just kind of mark that off lightly all the way along so we have a guide to go by. And on the ends up here, it just kind of rounds off, just softens off on the end up here. So I can kind of drop it off through there and drop it off over here this way. And now we're back down here again. And we get that little collar in place. Now we've got these little peanuts glued on the top of the head up here. We have to make sure they're the right size, and they're very similar in shape. The one over here on this side has a little bigger dent in the top of it up here than this one does. Let's mark off the begin. Let's attack this one over here. Let's go right over the top of the eye right here. We're not over the center. We're not quite over the center. We're a little bit to the right of center. So here's the center, go a little bit to the right, right up there. And this thing is right across from the top of the eye. So let's slide that over here. Now the ear sticks out even with this collar over here on the side. So I'm going to mark that down. It comes out here even with the side over here. And it goes up above the top of the head. If I come across here, I'm going to be about that distance above the top of the head. Well, that's a little bit less than like this collar thing. That's how long that is. So if I go a little bit less than that, right here, and go straight across, that's where the top of that ear needs to be. And then it dents in across from the top portion of the forehead right in here. It kind of dents in right about here. All right, let's see what we can do with that now. We come up here and it kind of angles out here a little bit. It doesn't go straight up. It would be silly to make this line anywhere other than angling out here, almost like about a 45-degree angle out of here. Slight little curve to it. And then we just kind of bulge this around and drop it down into this little dented area here. And take a little part of this at a time, just kind of driving around this thing here, describing our little trip around that shape and back into corner right here. And we have it placed fairly well. It didn't look to be too bad there. This is maybe a little bit steep right here. We'll kind of trim that off just a little bit. The one on the other side is very similar. Not exactly the same, but really very similar. We start this one just inside the edge of the eye right here, right in this area. Bottom of it here is a little bit lower than the top of the eye. Okay, a little bit lower than the top of the eye right here. So I'm going to go below the top of the eye and across. Okay. Here, this one sticks out a little bit past that collar shape. Just a tiny little bit past that. So I'll go a little bit past and straight up. That's where that needs to be. Top of the ears are pretty much about across from each other. Right there. And again, we have just a little bit of a dip in this thing as we come down here, so I'm going to, instead of a straight line across here, I'm going to just drop it in just a little bit. So we're up and around, back down into here again, and around, and dropping underneath. And we have those ears in there pretty well, because we described them and lined them up with some things here. All right. Now we have, I believe, all the shapes in place here. Now it's time to kind of check and see if there's anything that needs to be fixed up a little bit. I think on mine, everybody's is going to be different. Everybody's going to find maybe some little repair jobs to do here a little bit differently. This looks a little narrow to me on mine right here. The side of this thing comes over a little closer to the edge of the black part of this eye. I'm going to bring this over and kind of stretch this over here just a tiny little bit, make that nose just a little bit bigger. If I do that, I have to also maybe make these nostrils just a tiny little bit larger. And after we check around and see what goes here, and if everything looks to be pretty good shape, then we go back and darken over those lines, clean them up a little bit, and do our shading. So what I would like you to do for the remainder of this class period is to take your time and finish up this character, get it all cleaned up and shaded in and so on, and then continue with your redo drawings of any one of these 4 characters that we've worked on here. You may redo the same one a couple of times. You can switch around and redo one and then another if you choose to, but we want you as you go to emphasize the figuring and the describing, the measuring and the lining up of things as you go. That's what will allow you to reach a level of success that will be acceptable for what we're doing here, and it will allow us to move on and get to some other things with this drawing unit here. But before we can start talking about detail and get into shading and those kinds of things and doing some complete drawings, we need you to be able to do these line drawings, which are nothing more than getting all of your major shapes the right size in comparison to each other and in the right place in comparison to each other. Quite a bit of shading to do in this character. By the time you get finished with this, your pencil will be plenty dull. Okay, I'll leave this on the screen for a little while here if you would need that for any particular reason. You have the original right there. As you finish this up, make sure you have this one marked video also here in that upper left corner. And make sure you have all of your drawings that you're doing on your own now marked redo in that upper left corner also. Space right there. It's maybe just a tiny little bigger than that space, but not quite as much. Yeah.